we're doing our kind of pre-game thing, you know. Like I like that YouTube warns you that hey, it looks like you're trying to stream right now. Is that what you want to be doing? And yeah, that is what I want to be doing. All right, so let's give this a reload. Make sure this is actually okay. Do a quick test. Give me one more second and we'll get started. All right, looks like it's going okay on Odyssey, and it's going okay on YouTube. We're ready to go. All right, people, you ready? 3, 2, 1. Get myself a little organized here. Okay. I think I've got my coffee. I'm ready to sip. All right. Hello, and welcome to the Technocrat Live. I'm your host, Matthew Newhall, and tonight is going to be a good night. And I mean night because it's a little later than usual. I had some unexpected, amazing news, but also technical difficulties. Yeah, there was some stuff happening, and it was brutal. It was very metal. So I hope you find that explanation acceptable, because if not, I'm sorry. I really am. I really wanted to be going at 8, but, you know, sometimes the news requires undue attention. And I'm just going to leave it at that. We'll call it undue attention. Please, if you like the Technocrat Live, and if you like this show as we're progressing, please give it a like, give it a love, share it, tell people about it, and most of all, the thing I want everyone to do is I want people to comment. I want you guys to interact. I actually wrote this, designed this news segment to interact with my guests, especially when I don't have a guest. I want people to interact with Dystopia Report. I hope that that's acceptable and that you don't mind throwing a comment out there. It doesn't have to be super deep, you know, but I just want to get like a little ping back and see if, like, you know, hey, this story's boring, or you've heard this before, or that's amazing, I didn't know that and it changed my life. That's the kind of thing I want to hear about at that, especially at that level, good or bad. But any kind of feedback, you know, like, I like the color orange is something I can riff off of and can be fun and can be relevant. Hi, Jen. Hi, how are you? Thanks for tuning in. I'm glad that you find the delay acceptable, and I hope that all of you feel the same. I told you I'd interact. All right, so without delaying anymore, let's get right into Dystopia Report. Not a super long one, but there are definitely some good points of interest. Wait, I need to do a coffee sip first. Delicious. Okay. Well, I hope you don't have an axe to grind. No, that's funny. It's a private joke, but you too can throw out private jokes out in public here on the Technocrat Live, as have some of my guests. And every time I cheer, because that's exactly the kind of thing that is real in a world with no privacy, because privacy was a technological illusion, and the technocrats kind of know that. Yeah, it's not really right. You have a right to some of the things that privacy helps, but not privacy itself. Except maybe property. You do have a right to control your property, so if you're in your property and you... No, it's everything... Never mind. Anyway, let's get into tech. All right, so big news in the game of tech. I could have put this in science, but I decided to put it in tech only because it has not been formally verified. But the game of Othello has been solved. I don't know if you know how this works, but every game has a limited number of moves, no matter how complex the game is. And as time has been marching on in the age of computer science, We have been, this really should have been in science, so I'm going to call this tech science. As time has been marching on, we've been slowly solving the more and more complex games. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you remember a little movie called War Games, remember when Whopper played tic-tac-toe against itself because that was something it could do very quickly and actually test out all the possible combinations of playing tic-tac-toe and realized as long as neither player makes a mistake, it always ends up in a stalemate. That is an example of a game being solved. Of course, tic-tac-toe is relatively simple, as demonstrated in the mid-'80s, but we've been going through increasingly more complex ones. One of the more recent ones is Connect 4, which sounds like it wouldn't be that complex, but it can actually be pretty complex. But it turns out, if neither player makes a mistake in Connect 4, then, in other words, they both play a perfect game, the player that begins in Connect 4 always wins. So no mistakes means the opening player wins. So, I placed a couple of bets on Connect 4. I wish I had known that. But the best possible plays by both players in Othello is a draw, right? So they have actually calculated, 10 octillion possible game combinations. 10 octillion. It sounds like I just made that word up. Octillion is not a real word. No, it is. 10 octillion possible game combinations. They brute forced them all and have concluded that if both players play Othello perfectly, it's a draw. So that was originally done on what was in 2020 the most powerful supercomputer. Now that computer is number 11, by the way, if you wanted to see how time is marching on. So supercomputers, of course, fall out of favor as time goes on. They become less powerful compared to their contemporaries. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, it's only 3 years, right? Holy cow, it's already number 11. But yeah, the author of this routine of figuring this out is very proud of it. And I think it should be. Anyway, Discover Magazine if you want to know more. Thank you, Jim, for giving us that story. Very cool. Kind of pure computer science. Sometimes I don't put computer science in the science section, which I really should, because open source is the reference model for computer science, and computer science is a science that can change everyone's lives in the blink of an eye. Unlike most of the rest of them, where being old is really good. Actually, being any old science is good science. All right, so the Cruise division of GM. So Cruise is a section of the company General Motors, and it is the department, I guess, the sub-company, I guess the department, in charge of creating all self-driving routines for vehicles, and they have a unique vehicle that they're called the Argent, which is supposed to be a completely controlless car. That is their end game, where they're going to be selling cars that don't have controls, and you just tell it where you want to go, and it brings you there. So very ambitious. GM has a lot of money, and there's a lot of heart into or anticipation going into building cars that can drive themselves. So GM, I guess, realized how much backlash there was from them saying that they were pulling all of their self-driving car software off the market and not going further with the statement. So they've actually gone further now, and they said they're fixing them. So there's a recall on all the GM cars with self-driving software, and they will be updating the software so as to not have the same problem. Now, I didn't actually talk about the problem because the article I discovered didn't talk about it, perhaps because it's a little gruesome. Apparently a pedestrian was dragged under a self-driving car for 20 feet, and it wasn't particularly fast, so it was a grueling process, and I guess nobody could make the self-driving car stop doing that, whereas, of course, a human, you just yell at the driver and they'd stop, presumably, assuming that they weren't drunk out of their minds. Generally speaking, that is a prerequisite for driving a car. Yeah, so really not bad, but they are, quote, committed to autonomous vehicles. Yeah, I just I'm not sure how I feel about autonomous vehicles in general, I've been pretty negative on them. Not because they can't solve the intersection problem, but because when they go wrong and they meet an outlier, they're going to go really wrong. So, okay, that's it for the cruise story. Let's get on to tech government. So the U.S. government wants kill switches in every car. Now, if you're thinking remote kill switches, they want that too. Don't you disbelieve it. But, yeah, they definitely want that. But that's not the story this time. The U.S. government wants kill switches to stop drunk driving. In other words, they want a series of routines to determine whether you're driving inebriated or, in their actual words, and this is a quote, impaired. So what's impaired, right? That's the real problem. Drunk driving, yeah, but they're going to mandate. There's actually a law in place already from a couple of years ago that's going to go into effect in 2026 that wants to mandate that drunken or impaired driving results in a kill switch which shuts the car off. Right. What about somebody driving themselves to the hospital who's in severe distress because an ambulance won't arrive in time? How about a pregnant woman driving herself to the hospital in extreme pain and under extreme duress? Is it okay if the baby dies because we wanted to stop a drunk driver? Well, more specifically, to mandate that a company write an algorithm to stop a drunk driver, then inadvertently tags that pregnant woman who's having severe contractions and whose water's already broke. What are we doing here, people? Right. So there was an amendment to the yeah, like you driving yourself to the hospital in labor. And I mean, but that's a real thing. I mean, everybody's got a mother, and some mothers have done that. So now they can. Also, another thing that can now, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm staying away from examples where, like, if you're tired, it sometimes can result in behavior and driving like you're drunk, right? And of course, drunk driving in general is bad. But if you're injured and you're in a life-threatening situation, or if you're under extreme emotional duress and you're in because you have someone in the car that's in a life-threatening situation, you can drive in an impaired fashion. So is your car going to just shut off and now the person's going to die? What if someone's chasing you, right? Like, let's say somebody has decided to stalk you. You have a stalker and you haven't had a chance to get a restraining order. Like you driving yourself to the hospital with kidney stone pain. Look, you having kidney stones is your own fault because you went to space. Stop hanging out in space and you'll stop getting kidney stones. All right? I have no sympathy for voluntary space people. Okay. Anyway. Yeah, so what? You didn't hear that story last week? Yeah, apparently being in space for long term gives you kidney stones. They didn't cover that one in The Expanse. Cheers if you like that show. Great show. Okay, so yeah, so there was an amendment to the infrastructure bill, which is ready to pass pretty soon, HR 4820, and it just didn't pass. Like a handful of politicians opted out. And the thing is, this is so obviously dumb to leave any kind of impairment language in there. I mean, like, if a manufacturer is willing to certify with some penalty to themselves that they have actually identified a drunk driver, I might actually be okay to that. But if they don't have any skin in the game and they're legally required to write an algorithm, I mean, they might write, a 10-line program that doesn't really detect anything, right? It just detects that someone's distracted, right? There's good reasons, life-threatening reasons, to be distracted. And this is extremely dangerous because of that. And to me, the fact that the politicians that didn't vote yay to this bill to revoke the existing law that this is going to go into effect in 2026 just tells me how inept politicians are compared to technocrats. Technocrats understand inherently what can go wrong here. Politicians don't. And this is the kind of thing that makes me actually question democracy itself. In such a technological world where decision making is so technical and is so complicated, and there's so many tiny decisions to be made, I don't know that someone who can simply kiss babies and wave and smile and talks well in front of a camera is enough as a leader. I mean, it doesn't, they're just concerned with what looks good and what looks bad. They have no idea how this stuff works. And, and this just gets worse and worse. The tech government is the fastest growing section in the Dystopia Report because the government keeps doing dumb things in the technical space. Okay, well, now I'm going to contradict myself. So anyway, it's all over the place, revolver.news, but there's a ton of sources on that. It's HR 4820. Anyway, so Maine apparently has passed the right to repair law by a large margin. What's the difference here? No politicians. This was a public referendum. I mean, so this is actually pure democracy, not republic. A public referendum on a right to repair law in Maine. Now, if you don't know Maine very well, Maine is very much a farming state, so it's Tractor City. And there's one of the groups that's been most vocal during this process has been farmers, because farmers typically buy a tractor and try to drag that thing out for 20, 30, 40, 50 years and are really well known for that. That's why there's so many antique tractors that are still in service. I mean, like real antiques, because they keep them going. They figure out ways to cheaply in-house repair them and keep them running. So, which is something that they're not allowed to do, but now they are in Maine. And so now there are two. And if you count New York State and California with their lesser laws, and you have 4 states, I believe, with right to repair laws, it's looking worse and worse for people who are using the Digital Millennium Copyright Act to extort their customers when they sold them a durable good. So I'm really excited about this. Yay, Maine. Good for knowing what's going on. Tons of sources on that, too. I got it at 404 Media. And also, you get a free AirTag. Do you know what AirTags are? Those little doodads that use the fact that everybody's got an iPhone in their pocket to quietly communicate with everyone's iPhone, so you can roughly triangulate where the AirTag is anywhere on Earth that there's iPhones. Yeah, you get one for free. Well, only if you live in Washington, D.C. or inside the Beltway. I think it's all of D.C. actually. Outside the Beltway, too. They have a planned giveaway. They're going to be giving away AirTags to people to put in their cars, to presumably hide in their cars someplace, in an attempt to, well, I'm not going to say what you might be tempted to say, because they're not actually trying to stop theft. That's what they said. They are not trying to fight car theft. They are evidence and property recovery are the goal. They might be like, why would they say that? Why wouldn't they say they're trying to fight car theft, right? Nobody likes theft. Nobody likes crime. It makes everybody unhappy. Why not go right to targeting crime as the talking point? Well, it's really simple. If everybody has an AirTag and they've hidden it in their car, car thefts are going to plummet. It's effective. That's why people do it. This is like that LoJack thing that people were buying in the 90s, except it's literally so cheap they can just give it away, right? So instead of paying $2,000, and then of course everybody in the garage knows you have a valuable vehicle and where you live, now you can just quietly get an AirTag just like everyone else in your locale and put it in your car, and nobody knows where it is. And by the time they find it, the police may already be there. So they're citing property recovery and evidence. But I think the reason they're not targeting crime is because they're going to keep encouraging people to use AirTags long after the crime is gone. This is really about tracking vehicles, right? Why else would they word things this way? They're never going to walk this back after crime slows down, right? Because once crime slows down, once those alternative economies, those illegal economies go away, then they have to build a whole business model again. It's harder for them to ramp back up. There's a barrier to entry if you're into crime, especially with cars being so technological. But yeah, I think that the goal here really is to track people in the DC area. Anyway, I expect it to succeed. I expect them to get what they want, and you can expect to be, even if your personal car isn't tracked because you haven't put an AirTag in yours, that you'll be part of a very trackable traffic pattern at a state level. I mean, even though DC is not a state, but anyway, so I think that was kind of interesting, very clever. It's not all bad. I understand they have special security concerns there because it's the nation's capital. But also, yeah, read between the lines. All right, on to science, people. So Halo, a company called Halo, and Radboud University apparently are working on a lucid dream machine. I kid you not. Holy cow. I mean, spotless mind, anyone? Anyway, they're looking at this as a means of therapy, and some of the things that they're targeting are PTSD, anxiety problems, mood problems, etc. So the technology used here is called TUS, or transcranial focused ultrasound. I don't know why. Actually, that acronym does not. It's really weird, because they use them in tandem. I'm not sure. Maybe the TUS actually stands for something else. Okay, it might be one of those weird cases where the acronym, it's not an acronym at all, and it's just a nickname for transcranial ultrasound. Okay, anyway, so it's higher precision than TMS or TES. So that's the idea, is that this ultrasound can target a much smaller part of the brain, and it's able to create inception-like effects where they have been able to get people into a lucid dream state. So if you don't know what lucid dreams are, that's a dream where it's like Dream Warriors from what was it, Nightmare on Elm Street 4, I believe it was, Dream Warriors, and where you can take rational control of your dream while you're still asleep and while you're still in your dream. Sounds really good in theory. And one of the things they can also do is they can modulate the dream emotion, which actually sounds a little dangerous, because I think that if you already have lucid dream capability, you probably don't want to mix that with emotion. You don't want to make a happy dream sad, because you can alter your view of the world. So this really... and they can alter your mood after waking with the same technology. This is Vice.com if you want to read more. So this brings up some really interesting questions. We don't really understand what dreams do. I mean, there are some therapists and some psychologists that will tell you that we absolutely do understand dreams to a degree. But we don't understand how the mechanism works. Now, one of the possibilities here is that if you start inducing lucid dreams on a regular basis, you may not be able to dream in anything but a lucid fashion. And I think one of the things that's happening, this is SIVGene stuff now, I think that one of the things that's happening when you're dreaming is that you are optimizing and reorganizing the emotional metadata in your subconscious, which is, the subconscious is also in part your conscience and is your risk engine. And that's how you stay out of trouble. That's the thing that gives us empathy, and that's the way we have imagination, and that's how we see the world, is through the lens of our emotional metadata. You start mucking around with emotional metadata, you may get some radically different effects. Now, this has been my complaint about SSRIs, which some people swear by and instead have done a lot of good in the world. And I see the numbers there too, but it isn't without risk, and this isn't without risk either. One thing, so there's a possibility that people are going to go into lucid dream states and not be able to stop having lucid dreams on a regular basis, which would degrade their ability to do subconscious processing. It may influence your opinions and your feelings about things that are the way they are for good reason. You know, the problem with people who are poorly adjusted, or is in the more extreme case mental illness, is sometimes it's just an out of context advantage. You know, people are the way they are for a reason, and it may just be that their time hasn't come. You know, a follower in one scenario is a leader in another, and yeah, I'm a little concerned that this could, like, this is why I brought up spotless mind, even though spotless mind, you know, deleting a memory is a completely different technology. but there could be similar effects if this goes wrong. Anyway, I think it's really promising. Especially in the case of PTSD, some people can simply not recover without drugs. Therapy is not enough. So this might be an alternative to drugs. So in that case, this might be superior. We'll see. Anyway, really scary / promising technology. Also, something a little more fun. It turns out that pod of orcas, you remember those? There was a pod of orcas running amok in the Straits of Gibraltar. Apparently, the theory is that this pod was attacked. A particular orca was killed inadvertently or injured inadvertently by the propellers on a particular yacht, and the orcas in turn attacked that yacht and then got in the habit of attacking yachts. It's almost like a game. Well, they're at it again. On Halloween, nonetheless, they attacked a yacht for an entire hour and it sank. So they're still going in the Straits of Gibraltar. Pretty freaking awesome. Nature attacks. And also, it's a good reminder that wild animals are kind of wild, and there's a reason that it wasn't. People are selfish, and animal fats and skins and hides were a booming business. But also, there's a reason why people hunted wolves to extinction, say, in England, because they're a pain in the ass. And wild animals become emboldened when humans do not interfere with them. And I have a feeling that no one has ever pushed back on these orcas, and that's one of the reasons they're doing this. I'm not saying we should, but it's kind of an interesting take. Anyway, I think it's pretty funny. They're just murdering pleasure boats. I worry for them for the day that they go after a fishing vessel where the captain's last dime is in that vessel, and if it sinks, he's destroyed because he may just kill them. It'd be nice if we could figure out a way to get them to stop, so we could stop having a conflict without hurting these amazing creatures, which have definitely entertained us, and at some level imbue our sense of chaos with joy and enlightenment. Anyway, and the final story for today in the science section. I kind of can't believe this one. So it's kind of amazing. Apparently, MIT has discovered something new about evaporation of water. What? You learn this in grade school physics, right? That how water evaporates, right? Does anybody remember why water evaporates? I'll give you a hint. I'll tell you what I was taught. It was heat. Right? Heat is what makes water evaporate. The water molecules bounce around, they get really excited, and eventually they fly off as a gas. Nifty, right? Well, apparently that's not the only way. And this is like a shock to the scientific community, which seems counterintuitive, but I have racked my brain. I almost feel like this is like a Mandela effect. Like, what? Is this real? How do we not know this? But apparently we didn't. So anyway, light can directly evaporate water without generating any heat. This is kind of counterintuitive, right? So, and we're talking about liquids and not solids. So I don't know if you know what sublimation is, but sublimation is when the ice cubes in your freezer evaporate, and it's long been attributed to a light effect, where light, even though the air is very cold and there aren't like microscopic sections of the ice cube heating up to the point where you can go straight from a solid to a gas, ice cubes shrink over time, and ice shrinks over time. And this has been a large explanation for why there's water on Mars, but we can't see it because whenever it gets exposed to the atmosphere, it sublimates, whenever it's exposed to light. And the reason that this happens, one of the reasons this happens with ice, is because ice is opaque. So the light converts to heat when it gets absorbed on the surface of the ice, and eventually the ice completely evaporates as a result of that. Well, there's a problem with that, which is that water is transparent. So why is this happening? I don't know that they entirely know why, which is kind of amazing because you're spending so much energy on a unified theory, and it seems like one of the tricks to figuring that out might be in something as simple as this. It's largely this new understanding of this effect has now created an easy explanation for apparently a hole in our knowledge about fogs and mists, about where they come from. It was largely assumed that they were some sort of descending cloud, but that's not really, I mean, that boggles our observation. I mean, I've seen a mist rise from a body of water. And of course, people are like, oh, it's heat. Yes, sometimes, but sometimes the water temperature and the air temperature are the same and you still get a fog. So I'm not really sure how that plays into this either. I mean, of course, at night, I guess it must be heat, but during the day, you know. Anyway, so apparently the evaporated water exceeded the amount due to heat alone, and like 2 to 3 times as much as they expected. So they kind of extrapolated this 2 to 3 times. There's actually an implication technologically directly from this. If you're able to replicate this process during desalination, it may be possible to get 3 to 4 times more efficient desalination than currently possible. Now, I don't know if you know how desalination works. So we're talking about making salt water into drinkable, potable, fresh water. But usually it's done through reverse osmosis. So essentially, they just have a porous membrane that is porous at a atomic level, and well, I should say a molecular level, and it's only big enough to let water molecules through. So basically, it just lets water molecules and gases through. But it takes a lot of energy to push a small amount of water through a membrane like this, and there's a lot of waste. Like, there's a lot of water is just not sorted and recycled back into the water source. I mean, of course, you need some of that, but the vast majority, I think it's like 10 to 1 or 12 to 1, and it takes a ton of energy to do this. So this is why some people may have a drought even though they're right next to an ocean. But anyway, so if this is the case, you could make those things 3 to 4 times more efficient, so 300 to 400% more efficient in theory. So this is very promising, even in the short term. Maybe being able to use high-intensity light to desalinate instead of because light can be now in the world of LEDs, light can be produced fairly efficiently on a 1-to-1 energy ratio. So, yeah, this is super awesome. SciTechDaily.com if you want to read more. And there's a bunch of details about the experimentation, but I'm going to spare you guys that. I got it, but I don't necessarily want to impart it. So I think that's it for tonight's show. I hope you enjoyed it. Please, if you enjoyed it, tell me. Hold on a second. I got a message. Okay. Please tell me in the comments, and also give me a like, and please share this show. Tell other people about it. I'm sorry I didn't start at 8. I had a couple of delays, but next week should be on time. And I didn't mention before, I should have mentioned it before Dystopia Report, but I have a couple of technological improvements planned for the studio. So if you enjoy this show, but you think that the quality wasn't quite high enough, I'm working on that. And I think in another week or two, I think by the end of November, I'll at least be able to schedule new interviews. And I'm pumped for that. I really want to do it. I have several people who already want to do interviews. So it isn't that I don't have guests. It's just that I don't have time. I've been pretty strapped. I love you all. Thank you so much for tuning in. I love doing this show. And choose wisely. Choose to share. Good night, everybody.